2021 is over and 2022 has just begun, and I've decided I want to start this year on a positive note. That way I've got plenty far to fall! So this year I'm starting off by talking about the 5 games I enjoyed the most last year. Not all of them came out last year, but that's when I was playing them. And this video isn't some award ceremony where I'm claiming that my opinion defines which games are the best of them all, and others just aren't worth playing. Nah, instead this is me just shining a light on some of the games which got me through last year, so that you might find a new game to enjoy or just relive some of your own positive memories of these games. Enough of the intro, let's get on to my number 5 game, Skyrim Anniversary Edition. This one's going to be the least surprising and most well known of the list. After all, I've spent the past month and a half making builds for Skyrim AE. This is also the game on the list which could be argued is more expansion than game, but I wanted to include it anyway as it got me back into Skyrim, meant I had something to cover at the end of the year, and is overall a significant increase to content within the game. While the game may not be as balanced anymore, although it's not like Skyrim ever was a perfectly balanced game, it still is fun to play through, traversing a familiar world with a handful of changes that spice things up. While not as custom as a modded version of the game, it does give everyone the same starting platform of an enhanced version of the base game, which can still be modded further, for the most part, unless the mods don't work for the new version. But of course, for me, it was making videos which was the thing I enjoyed most about Anniversary Edition. In total, I released 36 videos last year, and half of them were from Skyrim, and then half of those were specifically Anniversary Edition. New in-game content that appeals to my audience gives me something to talk about, and also helps somewhat with both inspiration and fulfilling previous ideas through new items added into the game. While AE isn't the game I enjoyed playing the most this year, it has been fun and rewarding to cover the game, which is why coverage will continue through at least the start of this year. Maybe even all the way up to the release of Starfield, depending on how many ideas I have and what other projects I'm willing to keep on the back burner. On to the 4th place slot now, with a game you may not have heard of, Tainted Grail Conquest. This game is a deck-building, turn-based card combat roguelite RPG. Alright, so maybe game genres rarely tell anything useful these days, but that doesn't stop the game from being really cool. I'm a big fan of both card games and turn-based combat, which makes the combat encounters of the game my sort of thing. But there's plenty of additional complexity which makes this game stand apart from your run-of-the-mill card-based combat. There are multiple classes to play as, each having a slightly different playstyle, which may work better or worse for you. Berserkers are great for players who don't mind taking hits, while summoner classes let you have minions deal damage for you, allowing you to play more of a support role despite this being a single player game. But even if no class works out great for you on the first try, the roguelite nature of the game means that you get stronger every time you go through it, even if you die. This helps to make the game always feel rewarding to play. Even if you don't make it to a boss, you're almost certainly going to get through a fight or two, earn some resources, and maybe even complete some encounters, which add to the story of the game. A big drive to keep on playing is the village in which you find yourself. Out in the wilds are monsters being corrupted by the weirdness, a mysterious fog of change. But there are also survivors like yourself, who need to be saved and have their own issues. Find them out in the explorable areas, and you will gain the opportunity to have them join you in your village, providing services, a place to spend extra currencies, and quests which teach you all about their life in this strange and warped world. For me though, the big reason this game stands out is that it just proved to be a very fun game to just casually hop into from time to time. There's not a heavy narrative which you have to follow closely, and it's a game where you can easily play for just a few minutes or a few hours, depending on the mood you're in and what else you've got going on. I need games like that in my life. If I'm waiting for the oven to heat up, it feels good to be able to play something short. If I'm having a bad day and need to kill time until I fall asleep, then I can sink into this for hours, making significant progress towards the final secret endgame boss, which I still haven't actually attempted to face yet, as I want all the side characters to be happy first. But not every game needs to be something that a single person can jump into briefly and have a good casual time. Some games are better with others, and that's where my 3rd place game comes in, Warhammer Vermintide 2. Early last year, I started doing weekly co-op streams with a few content creator buddies of mine. Jarred Gaming, Crazy Eyed Eddie, and Kado Genesis joined me through the first 2 Borderlands games, Monster Hunter World, and Warhammer Vermintide 2. The 4 of us tore through these games. Or more accurately, I rushed ahead and the guys fought all the enemies I left behind. Any of these games could have made it to this slot, but I chose to go with Vermintide, specifically because it's the game of the bunch which improved the most by having others to play it with. It's not really a game I'd go out of my way to play on my own, but it's a great deal of fun to charge through with friends, ostensibly being Left 4 Dead but set within the world of Warhammer, with Chaos Warriors and Skaven replacing zombies, and magic spells and medieval weaponry replacing a worrying number of freely found firearms. For me, I not only got to game with my friends every single week, but I also got to share my love of Warhammer with others. While some popular Australian YouTubers may be in love with the world of the Elder Scrolls franchise, and some American YouTubers are better known as the Fallout experts, I've never managed to be quite up to their levels when it comes to lore. But when it comes to Warhammer, well, that's a world I can get engrossed in. Be it reading the adventures of Gotrek and Felix, playing the various video games that the IP has spawned, or from growing up with the experience of the tabletop where it all started. I've got a solid amount of knowledge for the world of Warhammer, and it's nice to be the one in the group able to tour newcomers through that world, explaining how Sigmar is basically Talos mixed with Hercules, that the 4 Chaos Gods embody distinctive human traits, or that orcs are fungi which believe in themselves enough to become more ripped than nearly any human alive. There's a lot of fond memories I have of this time, and all it took was a solid enough game that let me and my friends mess about and have some fun. But with friendship covered, it's now on to the penultimate ranking. In at number 2 is Halo Infinite. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you'll have already heard plenty of the overwhelming praise this game has received. Despite being delayed for over a year, it seems the wait was well worth it. Instead of releasing rushed and filled with bugs, glitches and other issues, causing the standard internet hate response we're all too familiar with now, this game was able to have a pretty solid beta period and launch, resulting in widespread praise and Metacritic scores consistently above 80%. Despite initial backlash from the delay and a small amount of controversy for the Battle Pass system, which is already being adjusted to be better for players, the game is being seen as one of the best of the year. And after so many disappointing releases of late, who's surprised? For me, the multiplayer has been less of a focus. It's the sort of thing I might play with mates, but I just can't play competitive FPS games solo anymore, without stressing out every second that I'm letting the team down, even if I'm at the top of the scoreboard. So instead my focus has been on multiplayer, and here it really feels like the devs added in treats just for me. I love open world games and advanced movement techniques, and what does Infinite have? A semi-open world in a previously linear and level-based series, plus a freaking grappling hook! For me, this just makes the entire game so much better. I'm not constrained in levels where there's predetermined paths to constantly follow. I can use the tools at my disposal to deal with encounters in a variety of different ways. Grappling up high to get a vantage point, grappling away from a horde of approaching enemies to avoid being overwhelmed, or grappling directly onto an enemy to smack them in the face. Grappling is great. But it's not the only thing about the game which I have to praise. Limited ammo promotes rapid switches of weapons and gets you to really try out everything the game has to offer. Progression naturally goes by at a solid pace, but you can also seek out every map marker for a little added power early on, and the story has hard-hitting moments which don't even require you to be up to date on Halo lore. The last Halo game I played was 4, and that was very briefly. The only games in the franchise I've actually beat are Halo Combat Evolved and Halo Reach. I have no idea about who's who or what's happening in the universe, but there were still plenty of emotional beats that resonated on their own, and a clear purpose of the plot which didn't require previous knowledge to appreciate, even if all the details weren't explained in this game alone. Halo Infinite is a great FPS, of which I have no major complaints, and has more than earned its place at the number 2 slot. Before we move on to my number 1 game I played last year, I want to give a quick shout out to a few honourable mentions. Risen is a relatively old RPG at this point, which I only really played for the purposes of the video. Additionally, I hit a bit of a roadblock in the game which I just couldn't get past, which prevented me from ever beating it. But despite this, it's found a small place in my even smaller heart, as there's just something about the world of the game I really clicked with. Whenever I see a coastal town in another game, my mind's drawn to Harbour Town, and the waves crashing against the dock, and all the various quests that can be completed there. If you want to hear more about the game, do check out this video. I'll make sure it's linked in both the cards and description. Risen features as the first game of the list, so it's nice and quick to get to. My other two honourable mentions are Octopath Traveler and Nier Automata, or Automata. I'm really not sure how you're supposed to pronounce that. The reason I'm mentioning both of these at once is they're games I played on my Xbox this year, as opposed to my computer where I do all my work. This means I've got no footage of either, and will have to deal with the game trailers for them instead. Octopath Traveler is a charming little JRPG, reminiscent of the games I loved most as a kid. With 8 main characters who all have their own stories to go through, you travel the world as a party, fighting monsters, fulfilling your missions, and meeting a wide array of interesting NPCs. A combat system that works around breaking down an enemy's shield by using the right damage type helps to keep the combat engaging, even when just level grinding. And the variety of stories means that you don't have to stick with just one narrative throughout the game, instead picking and choosing whose story you want to experience first, or even focusing more on the side quests that you're given. Nier Automata is a heart-wrenching third-person open-world action game that will make you question what being human actually means. Despite my distaste for third-person, this is one of those games which is so incredible that even I was willing to complete it. Multiple times, of course, because there are several endings you need to see. With a variety of gameplay styles baked into the game, moving character moments, and some stylish boss fights, this game hit so much harder than I thought it would, and my life is the better for having beat it. Those were the honourable mentions, but now we move on to the number 1 slot. The game which I somewhat arbitrarily put at the top of this list, based on my personal and ever-changing bias. My most favourite game I played in 2021 was Dungeons and Dragons / Celesta Crown of the Magister, which is also basically Dungeons and Dragons, but not quite. Alright, let me explain. Remember my Vermintide 2 entry where I talked about how fun it was to game with friends each week? Well, that group got back together in the summer as Jared had invited us to play Dungeons and Dragons with one another through the magic of the internet and the experience of Sean, our DM. Despite always being friends with nerds, having a tendency towards fantasy, and loving to make up characters all the time, I had somehow never played D&D. So this past year marked the first time I did so. Asgore the Leonin Barbarian tore through his enemies, beheading them with a mighty swing of his greatsword, and only mostly being the weakest party member overall who nearly died several times. While D&D with friends was great fun, the sessions also took place at 1 AM UK time, because my friendship group at this point in my life is mostly made of Americans who aren't courteous enough to be my next door neighbours. This meant that I couldn't stick with it forever, as I was visibly starting to drift off during sessions, and so had to say goodbye to the group. And that's where Celesta comes in. As I was browsing Game Pass one day, I came across an interesting looking D&D style game and installed it on a whim. Since then, I have played this game nearly every day, as it's basically D&D that I can play on my own at any time. While being a far more stripped back version of a current Dungeons & Dragons model, and obviously missing the party shenanigans you get when playing with friends, it's been an admirable substitute. There's all the fun of trying desperately to get the right roll you need to face down a powerful foe, the characters you create do all have their own personalities, and there's some well-written dialogue based around the traits they were given, and the character creator itself lets you build up a diverse band of adventurers to go on lengthy campaigns with. And I've barely even scratched the surface of the campaigns after weeks of playing. Like seriously, there's 3 main campaigns, and I don't even think I'm halfway through the first one, and I've yet to touch the other 2. While I hope that I'll one day be able to play Dungeons & Dragons again, maybe even in person with new friends or making the fantasy world where my social skills work, for now I have Celesta to tide me by, giving me a fix of simplified D&D and letting me experience one of the greatest games ever made. And those are the games I loved playing in 2021. But what of this year? Obviously there's Starfield coming in November, which I'm hoping will boost my channel up to a more sustainable point, and earlier in the year I am looking forward to both Total War Warhammer 3 and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. Plus I've already got plenty of other plans for the channel. This month I want to stream semi-regularly, and already have a community poll up asking you all what streams you'd like to see. Plus I've got plenty more Skyrim builds I'm slowly getting through. And then there's that secret Fallout project which I've been working on for over a year now. I'd really like to get that out before Starfield hits. Sounds like I've got quite a year ahead of me. And if you want to be there for the journey, well, you already know what to do. As always, thanks for watching. Sarge out.